A brief agenda for our evening. We'll start with the purpose of the comprehensive plan, as well as a project overview and timeline. And then the bulk of our time is really going to be spent on the research and topic information prepared by staff, focusing on the various elements that are under review with phase one. And then we'll close the night out with questions and discussion. There's a lot of information tonight, so we ask that you hold questions till the end, please. So before we get started, we wanted to set the stage with what a comprehensive plan is. The purpose of a comprehensive plan is to guide coordinated and harmonious development. It's general in nature and with its goals, objectives, and maps provides long-range recommendations for the general development of land. The development of comprehensive plans is required by the Code of Virginia. Comprehensive plans only provide guidance and recommendations and are not law like the zoning ordinance. The policy plan includes goals, objectives, and policies. Goals provide the general direction of the plan. Objectives include statements to help achieve those goals. And finally, policies include specific approaches for pursuing an objective. The policy plan applies countywide. Therefore, it's important to ensure that the policies developed are general and flexible enough to apply across the county. The Board of Supervisors authorized the consideration of a comprehensive plan amendment to update the countywide policy plan. We're currently in phase one of this effort, which includes updating the introduction, land use, transportation, environment, parks and recreation, and human services elements, as well as incorporating policies for community health and equity. The goal of this update is to align with the strategic plan in One Fairfax, update the existing policies, and add new policies as needed. For our project timeline, currently we're at the end of phase two of our outreach, which began this past fall. Our meeting today is intended to continue on the outreach that we started last summer and fall and is informed by the research papers that were recently published to our webpage. We'll be taking all feedback and recommendations to date and incorporating them into a community feedback report, which we anticipate releasing in March with our community check-in phase. Today, we're here to provide information regarding staff's research and findings and how they relate to policy changes. So without further ado,
Hi, good evening, everybody. I am Salem Bush. I work for the Department of Planning and Development, and I am the topic lead for the introduction chapter. It references the preface in the current comprehensive plan. And when we started looking at updating this chapter, we really wanted to focus on what is the actual intent of the policy plan introduction. And so really, I think one of the main things that it does is show how the overall comprehensive plan is used. So it's not just the policy plan elements, which we're in the middle of updating, but it also is the area plans, plan amendments, and how the actual policy plan itself works with the area plans and how it works when staff and the community and the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors are going through plan amendment reviews, or also development review for things like rezonings and special exceptions. And then we also have the concept for future development. So how all those things kind of tie together within the comprehensive plan. And then another thing, and probably the most important thing that the introduction chapter does, is it establishes the overarching goals, the framework for the rest of the policy plan. And then also it provides a bit more context on what these goals are. And so when revising this plan, what we've been thinking and kind of what we've been talking about is trying to provide kind of more context to why these goals are so important to the county. And then more specifically, how do they actually relate to land use considerations? And then another aspect of the plan, the introduction chapter, is that it provides a place to provide more context on the actual planning process that everyone goes through in the county, including how the plan is implemented, how the plan is reviewed or monitored, and then also how we conduct citizen participation through the planning process. So there's a bunch of different ways, and that's all outlined in this introduction chapter. Next slide, please. And then just to get a little more specific in the thinking of some of the revisions that we've been preparing in this update for the introduction chapter, just thinking again about the intent of the chapter. So improving that intent by improving the flow of the chapter, removing some of the areas in the current preface that don't really contribute as much to the overall chapter itself. And so some of that's like moving things like the state code proffer to another appendix and moving some of the history section to another appendix. But also thinking about modernizing language to introduce new planning and land use priorities. So that includes updating the context of the document to reflect more current trends and issues facing the county today. and things like that is trying to think about, there's definitely a lot in the introduction that talks about, the focus of county's development is now within the mixed use centers as reflected in the concept for future development. And so trying to explain what the purpose of those mixed use centers are, a lot of the positives around those things. So that's something we've been fleshing out in the introduction. And then also thinking more about how we actually provide access to people to various land uses and amenities that are associated with land uses that help contribute to the quality of life for residents. So that includes affordable housing, employment, commercial services, public facilities, parks and recreation, healthy communities, and amongst other services that are provided as we go through reviews and review policy throughout in the plan. And then also, just thinking about currently, we don't have a land use vision for the comprehensive plan. So we've been developing a land use vision, which I'll share here. And then, of course, a revised set of goals to reflect current day priorities. Next slide, please. And then just quickly to go over, this is some of the information that's been garnered through the outreach that we've done amongst different agencies through the county. The first phase of community meetings, presentations and discussions with the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. But the first overarching thing that everyone agreed on was that the new chapter and the new plan should align with the countywide strategic plan. Again, developing that land use vision statement, and that the goal should be visionary and set a high level expectation of what we want the county to be like in the future. And then again, establishing one kind of overarching goal in the very beginning that is specifically related to land use, and then incorporating, as Karine mentioned earlier, new goals for equity and healthy communities within the goals. And also just thinking about a couple goals more specifically, like transportation should be more focused on urban design concepts such as streetscape and multimodal design. And last but not least, that recognizing and establishing a tone that all the goals are interrelated and should not be considered outside of the context of the other goals. Next slide, please. And here I'll just share the drafted land use vision statement. This has been presented to the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors, and this is, I'll read it out loud for everyone. The county will plan for growth by providing diverse housing options, ample employment and business opportunities, essential services, and preserve a natural environment for future generations. Communities will be designed to be safe, walkable, and well connected by multimodal transportation options with cultural, recreational, and healthy spaces that foster a sense of place and ensure a high quality of life for all people. Next slide, please. And here are the goals that have been established through this update. Again, these goals are very much tied to the countywide strategic plan in terms of the 10 community outcome areas that have been identified as the highest priorities of the county. And I won't go through each goal now. All these are on our website. Each goal actually has a narrative associated with it that gets into a little bit more specifics for that overarching goal that then will feed into the objectives and policies of the other elements that you'll hear about tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Salem. Hi, everyone. I'm Leah Niebauer with the Planning Department, and I'm going to go over the equity section. So the board has directed staff to incorporate the One Fairfax policy within the updated policy plan. And so the One Fairfax policy, which was adopted in 2016, it commits the county and provides guidance to consider equity when planning, developing, and implementing policies and initiatives. And so then further on in 2020, in order to better understand the drivers of inequity, the county put together the Chairman's Task Force on Race and Equity. And part of that report was created a definition for equitable development, which is on the screen now. And so it reads, Fairfax County is a place where all people live in communities of opportunity with the ability to engage fully in decisions that affect their lives and neighborhoods. Next slide, please. And so to further define this and how to apply this to Fairfax County, last year, the Metropolitan Washington Council of Government, COG for short, the Board of Directors, which did include some of our own Board of Supervisors, they adopted the Regional Equitable Development Principles in order to help guide local governments in advancing equity through through the comprehensive plan. And so there are several jurisdictions that have adopted these principles as part of their work as well. And so some of the principles outlined here, such as expanding affordable housing and promote people-centered multimodal mobility and connectivity, are principles that we focus on. And then there are some that need to be further explored, such as preventing residential, commercial, and cultural displacement. Next slide, please. And so the strategic plan provides some direction for Fairfax County on how to incorporate and implement the One Fairfax policy's commitment to equitable development, um, as seen through the Access to Opportunity framework, which is presented within the strategic plan. So this framework is really a key consideration, and based on these principles, it really focuses on looking at data and community experiences in order to better understand the opportunities and vulnerabilities throughout the county. And so the next step is to look into targeting interventions to build opportunity, connect opportunity, and encourage the development of an inclusive economy. Next slide, please. And so these are some principles from the strategic plan that focuses on strategies that prioritize access to opportunity. And so this will be posted online, so you can read through them more thoroughly. But some of the principles speak specifically to displacement, and there are many elements that fall under the umbrella of equity. So therefore, equity will be a component throughout the policy plan sections rather than a standalone section. So these are some of the principles that are laid out for us already and provide a sense of direction for how to move forward. Next slide, please. And so the next two slides, I'm going to briefly talk about some of the draft recommendations, which are wide-ranging. And so the first one includes an overarching equitable development policy plan principle within the plan to ensure access to opportunity, which Salem touched on in the introduction section a little bit. And then the second one is to strengthen the policy plan's commitment to inclusive community engagement. And so the policy plan introduction touches on this, but given the importance, we would like to strengthen and deepen our work to ensure all voices are part of the process. Next slide, please. And then number 3 gets to creating a policy plan objectives that recommend the use of appropriate data-based tools in order to support the communities of opportunity framework, which gets at the access of opportunities. And so this will specify the importance of using data and analytical tools in order to better understand the dynamics of opportunity and vulnerability within the county. And so within that, we'll be including objectives in the land use element based on the strategic plan related to displacement in order to comprehend what commercial and residential displacement in the county looks like and what tools we really need to help prevent displacement. And so typically tools aren't something that we incorporate within the policy plan, but more of an implementation of the policy plan. And so we have tools related to affordable housing and the land use team, which you hear from tonight, touches slightly on retail displacement. So we would like to dive into that more to understand the tools and possible trade-offs that could be used to help mitigate displacement. And that's it for equity.
Hi, good evening. I'm Anna Ricklin. I am the Health and All Policies Manager with the Fairfax County Health Department, and I am the lead for the health section. And health, like equity, is a new topic for the policy plan. And when we're thinking about how we're going to include health in our plan, we're looking back at history and seeing that urban planning, the practice of land use planning really has a shared history with the rise of public health also as a practice, and looking at how both initially came about to improve quality of life. And we also know that planning and urban design can have a significant impact on our health over the course of our lives. We have a lot of information in the literature that tells us that community design and planning affect how and where we exercise, what food choices are available to us. Of course, they impact air and water quality, and they also impact and shape how we connect to one another. And so with those impacts from the built environment or the planned environment, it's really important that we start to include health in our plan. Next. And one of the other things that we need to do is also look at health and health-related data. This is just one example of the data that we're looking at. This is life expectancy. You can see that between two different census tracts in Fairfax County. We chose the most extreme census tracts to illustrate the point, but we see a 13-year age gap in life expectancy across different census tracts in the county. And that's a pretty big gap, pretty significant. We wouldn't want to see any gap, but 2 or 3 years between census tracts wouldn't be a big deal. But this is a pretty significant gap. And so this leads us to think that there is a place component to this discrepancy, this disparity in life expectancy. And so looking at other place-based data can help guide our priorities on different topics or looking at what might be needed in different areas of the county. Next. So we looked at a lot of different plans from around the country, and those are detailed in the white paper that was released about healthy communities. So if you're interested in what places like Charlotte or DC or Montgomery County or Prince George's County are doing when it comes to including health in their comprehensive plan, some of those examples are laid out in our paper, which is on this project website. And we looked at all of those and we looked at what is needed, what some of the gaps are in Fairfax County when it comes to healthy planning. And we've decided that our idea is to develop a new Healthy Communities chapter for our comprehensive policy plan that will have 5 categories and, in a sense, an interwoven equity across those different buckets of the plan. And so the first area is active living. How do we promote active living? How do we make it so that getting on your bike, taking a walk, using transit is just as easy or almost as easy as getting in a car to go somewhere? How do we ensure that people have access from where they live or from where they work or from their school to recreation opportunities? We're also looking at growing our food system, and this includes both food production, so where and how food is grown, thinking about not just backyard gardens or community gardens, but larger scale urban agriculture, or maybe even indoor hydroponic farming. How do we think about more creative ways to make space, make land or buildings available for food production? And also with food buying and food consuming, where can food be sold, especially if it's locally grown or grown in our neighborhoods? How do we have greater access to locally grown food and more fruits and vegetables? Next. And then the last 3, the other 3 buckets are increasing our social connections. So thinking really mindfully about our placemaking activities, our urban design, so that people have more opportunities to connect with one another without having to go to the mall, for example, or having to go to a coffee shop and buy a coffee to be able to sit and talk with your friends. What are some other spaces where people can connect, not just outdoors, but also in their neighborhoods? And then looking at green infrastructure and climate health, we know that with a changing climate, these many different things have a significant impact on our health. And so green infrastructure, trees, connected green spaces, and looking at the heat island effect and reducing impervious pavements and impervious land covering in areas, especially the areas of the county that have that are experiencing the highest heat island effect, which are some of the areas of the county which have other limits to their opportunity. And then finally, of course, in a health chapter, we're looking at ensuring access to healthcare and human services. So these are mostly thinking about private healthcare and human services that are delivered from our county partners, our nonprofit organizations, as well as some services that are delivered by the county that are really important for ensuring that people can have live to their best health potential. And across all of these, prioritizing policies that address health inequity. Thank you.
Hi. Good evening. I'm Katrina Knutson. I'm with the Department of Planning and Development, and I'm going to be talking tonight about the land use element
land use element of the policy plan. It contains countywide objectives and policies that are organized into 5 broad categories. Those are land use pattern, land use intensity, the pace of development, land use compatibility, and land conservation. And there are a total of 17 objectives with associated policies. So in addition to these policies and objectives, there are 14 appendices that provide guidelines to address land use topics. And we're in the process right now of reviewing these objectives and policies to determine, if there are redundancies with other county policies. We're also looking at kind of interweaving some of the policies with the other topic areas that you'll be hearing about tonight to see how we can tie everything together. Also, how the objectives and policies may need to be updated, or what objectives or policies may need to be added. We will also incorporate recommendations and white papers that were done by Clarion. So those will be what I'm going to be talking about on the next slides. Next slide, please. So the Department of Planning and Development retained Clarion to complete a review of office, industrial, and retail land use trends as part of the ongoing work for Plan Forward. Clarion examined national and regional trends to determine for land planned, zoned, and used for office, and also they made recommendations regarding these topic areas that we are considering as part of our review of the land use element of the policy plan. Next slide, please. So the recommendations provided in the Clarion report focus on, for office, they focus on adapting the county's approach to office conversions in response to current trends and market conditions. Currently, we have Appendix 13 of the policy plan. It was adopted in 2017, and it provides guidelines for the repurposing of older commercial buildings that are outdated and unable to compete with newer buildings that are located in transit accessible activity centers, or simply just cannot be leased because they've become obsolete. While the existing guidance in Appendix 13, it aligns with national best practices. Since its adoption in 2017, circumstances with the office use have changed. So this highlights the need for a more practical, a more proactive, and detailed approach to office conversions. Clarion has proposed additional criteria for inclusion in Appendix 13. And these new criteria would build upon the existing performance criteria in the policy plan, and also provide expanded considerations to better assess office repurposing requests. So the expanded criteria include location, class, and age of office space, proximity to rail transit, proximity to amenities and necessities, whether or not it's located in one of the county's revitalization areas, the inclusion of affordable and workforce housing, and whether it is proposing reuse or simply replacement. Next slide, please. So this is for the industrial. The report's first recommendation is to retain existing industrial land in designated industrial areas to the extent possible. The report highlights the 3 areas designated as industrial in the county's concept for future development map, and those include Beltway South, the I-95 corridor, and the Ravensworth industrial area. And it recommends a potential plan amendment to review and update policies for these 3 areas to discourage the conversion of industrial land for residential use. The report also recommends reviewing and considering updates to the comprehensive plan for the Tyson's Urban Center, the Dulles Suburban Center, and the transit station areas located along the orange and silver lines. The recommendation is basically to clarify if the intent is to maintain and preserve the concentration of these industrial uses or to encourage them to convert to other uses. And so policy D and objective 1 of the housing element, it states, do not approve residential rezoning applications above the low end of the plan range unless an appropriate commitment of land, dwelling units, and or cash contribution to the housing trust fund is provided. So the report highlights this policy because of its relevance to requests to replan industrial land to allow for residential development. The report recommends that the policy be amended to ensure plan amendment nominations that want to convert industrial land to residential to be tied to commensurate community benefits being provided. Next slide, please. And then lastly, for retail, Clarion's recommendation for the policy plan amendment, in this case, focus on vacant retail space and opportunities to leverage their potential for alternative uses. First, the recommendation is that the county should consider policies, development agreements, or incentives to discourage the displacement of existing viable retail enterprises, where there's a proposal for site redevelopment. This could allow for both the replacement of outmoded retail development and the preservation of retail outlets that remain in them. Potential policy and programmatic considerations could include policies to prevent or minimize displacement, the right of return of a tenant, and then community benefits agreements or relocation assistance or other county programs or incentives. Secondly, the county could clarify locations for ground floor retail as part of the policy plan and area plans. While Clarion was not able to provide a specific amount of retail needed, they did identify considerations where ground floor retail should be considered. Potential keys to ground floor retail success include location along major streets, transit corridors with good pedestrian and non-motorized access, having a critical mass of residents and or office workers nearby. Transit planners employ a metric to determine if density can support transit, and a similar metric could be used when considering factors for ground floor retail success. And the use of market studies could also help inform key areas for retail based on demographics and income. And then the other two items listed here, expanding allowable uses for struggling commercial areas and encourage retail conversion with expanded criteria, were identified in the report with a recognition that the county already has policies and regulations in place to support this, particularly related to adding housing to commercially zoned areas and using Appendix 13 that already exists in the policy plan to support conversions of retail into other uses. And lastly, Clarion recommended additional criteria to review these requests absent a plan amendment. Right, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Carly Aubrey with DPD, and along with me, Corrine Bebeck we are the topic leads for the environment element update. So right now, the environment element of the policy plan contains countywide objectives and policies that are organized into the 5 broad categories that are listed on this slide. And within these categories, there are a total of 13 objectives and associated policies. And then there is also an appendix with guidelines for tidal shoreline erosion control measures. Over the past few months, we have reviewed the policies and have identified areas where there is either room for improvement, where the scope of an objective or policy could be broadened, or where environmental concerns have risen to the forefront since the last policy plan update. So we are also looking to incorporate recommendations in the research papers that were done by staff, which we will speak to on the next few slides. One paper we did was on stormwater management policies, where we looked at, we researched adopted plans, policies, and codes at the state and county levels that address stormwater management, as well as examples of comprehensive plan policies from other jurisdictions. And in terms of policy recommendations, we have identified the following areas shown here, and just a couple examples. For climate resiliency, we want to recognize the different types of flooding hazards and develop policies in coordination with appropriate county staff and plans, such as Resilient Fairfax. And then we also want to develop or identify existing policies that can mitigate urban heat island impacts, such as green roofs and increased tree conservation and plantings, which also have stormwater benefits. Another example is salt management. We would like to have a policy that encourages salt management plans on development sites, and for uses with cooling systems, encourage the monitoring of cooling system discharges into the wastewater system, or encourage the use of alternative cooling systems. Yeah, next slide, please. For the green building research paper, we looked at current policies, which address the short and long-term impacts on the environment and building occupants. And there are areas that could be further strengthened to align with climate goals, county plans, and regional efforts, and also formalize the practices that have been implemented through rezonings and special exceptions. So policy recommendations that we're looking at are listed here, and a couple examples include a more specific focus on zero waste strategies for waste reduction and future diversion strategies, and also an increased focus on renewable energy resource utilization within projects, including on-site generation. Next slide, please. And the final paper we looked at was for conservation corridors. Conservation corridors can be defined as linear strips of vegetation that serve as natural links between core habitat areas and that allow for the movement of birds, animals, and humans. And in terms of policy recommendations, we have those that are listed here. A couple examples. For the countywide corridor planning, we would look at, through coordination with appropriate stakeholders, work to establish a countywide natural infrastructure and conservation connectivity network for use in the land development and review process. And at more of the site level, we would like to have a policy that to encourage identifying existing or potential conservation corridor areas on or adjacent to a proposed development site. And then through the site design process, identify the tree preservation, native landscaping, green infrastructure, and other environmental features within a site, and encourage that those be located adjacent to those areas. Next slide, please. And finally, these are just a list of some of the other areas that we're looking at. The goals of these updates are really to have a greater emphasis and recognition on the importance of what the natural world provides and trying to keep and improve a healthy natural environment for topics like lighting, healthy soils, and native vegetation. And with all of those, having an eye towards community health and equity. And that concludes the environment update.
Great, thanks, Carly. My name is Ryan Stewart, and I'm a senior planner with the Department of Planning and Development. And I am, along with my co-lead, Stephanie Cornejo with the Park Authority, we are leading the Parks and Recreation element of the policy plan update. So the policy plan speaks to the role that our parks play in the quality of life of our county. And this guidance is twofold. Number one, it provides for the county's health and recreational needs. And number two, looking at the stewardship of land, natural resources, and cultural resources entrusted to the county's care. The guidance also includes details such as the types of parks that we have and how they should function, the role of open space in our mixed-use centers, how we go about acquiring new parkland and encouraging the creation of new public parks, and then also some population-based service level standards that help to determine how many facilities are needed. For example, do we have enough playgrounds or soccer fields to serve the population? In September of 2023, the Park Authority adopted what's known as the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Access Strategy, or PROSA for short. PROSA is a high-level approach to identifying and prioritizing capital investments in the park system. It's data-driven, and it's used to inform decisions through the equity lens that my colleague Michelle spoke about earlier in the presentation. Essentially, it answers the question, does everyone in the county receive the full benefits of a modern award-winning park system? We are updating the policy plan in 2 phases. Phase 1 is a minor editorial update to implement PROSA strategies as they relate to our countywide land use planning. And then Phase 2 requires some additional data and study to be conducted beforehand. And we'll focus on the service level and design standards I mentioned earlier, and also how the county is managing its natural and cultural resources. Next slide, please. Now I won't read this slide in great detail, but it shows how the 2 phases that we're using follow closely with the same phases of the policy plan update as a whole. So you can see in this timeline how in our first phase is focused on PROSA, and the second phase is really where the bulk of the updates we anticipate will occur. The Park Authority is just now beginning its next needs assessment, which is a community survey effort designed to gauge how well the current complement of parks, amenities, and facilities meets the public need, and also what may be needed in the future to provide for changing interests in sports, habits, and other recreational trends. The Park Authority will also be updating its Park System Master Plan, which is the overall blueprint for the agency, as well as its 5-year strategic plan and other operational plans that go into the day-to-day management of the park system. That is to say that each of these elements here listed in phase 2 will be things that we will be addressing in the future, but we do not yet have the data for at this time. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, PROSA is a data-driven strategy with a focus on equitable park access. It's used as a guide for how the Park Authority prioritizes investments in the park system. There are 4 main components. Number 1 is the goal that all county residents live within a 10-minute walk to a Park Authority park. It's not enough simply to have a park nearby, but the community should be able to access the park safely and that the park provides valuable amenities and experiences. We know from the data that nearly 90% of residents live within a 1/2 mile of a park, but only 52% live within a safe 10-minute walk to a park entrance. And so walkable access is really a key indicator of how well and equitable the Park Authority serves the community. The second goal here is to enhance access to complete park experiences. Now, what do we mean by that? A complete park access or a complete park experience is the goal is to provide a balance of recreational experiences and a diverse set of amenities that can serve a broad range of interests. So these include active recreation, such as your sport fields or your ball courts, passive recreation, which may include walking, trails, benches, contemplative areas, opportunities for being social and gathering as a group, and also natural and cultural recreation as well in our woods and in our historic sites. So PROSA, in this case, PROSA uses what's called a park experience score, which is essentially a metric along these 4 different types of active, passive, social, and natural and cultural opportunities. It's a metric to really see how well a park is serving the community, and so you can drill down on an individual park and you can give a score to each of those categories, and then that score is used in terms of prioritizing where investments may be needed. Enriching habitat and connectivity between environmental corridors. Of course, my colleague just mentioned how habitat corridors and connectivity are a real focus of the environmental element. As the county's major landowner, nearly 10% of the county land is in the park system. We clearly recognize that the county plays a major role in this habitat connectivity, especially with our stream valleys and our natural areas. Those areas that have been set aside for future preservation and restoration as well. And so as we work with the Park Authority to update the Natural Resources Management Plan and their strategies, we'll be exploring ways how we may be able to foster connectivity between habitats as well. And then the last element here is to analyze and prioritize the recreational needs and projects with an equity lens. This is essentially, ensuring that all members of the community receive value from the park system and have access to quality amenities and that the goal here is to then use this data to reinvest in those areas of the county that are more vulnerable or that have historically not received the same level of investment as others. And so, as we look at integrating One Fairfax into the park planning methodology, we recognize that this is essential for a more inclusive, equitable, and thriving system of parks, trails, open spaces, and recreation, and so forth. And with that, I will turn it over to, I believe, our last speaker, who is on transportation this evening.
Thank you so much. Good evening. I am Taylor Waymeyer from the Transportation Planning section of the Fairfax County Department of Transportation. The county's vision for the multimodal transportation system includes efficient, affordable, and safe movement for residents, businesses, visitors, and goods to ensure accessibility and safety for all users. Next slide, please. A multimodal transportation system will provide choices and balance efficiency across all modes of transportation. This may include a well-designed and maintained network of roads, sidewalks, trails, and transit options that accommodate diverse needs, as well as by updating existing transportation policy to address increased development, population growth, and travel demand. We completed 3 focused topic research papers to support this effort. The first is the CTA, or Comprehensive Transportation Analysis, which aims to update the approach to transportation impact studies to better account for trade-offs between travel modes that align with broader mobility goals. This framework prioritizes context-sensitive solutions and establishes performance measures to support balanced multimodal transportation systems. This includes adding metrics such as new pedestrian level of comfort, bicycle level of traffic stress, and vehicle miles traveled. Fairfax, next slide.
Sorry.
Please.
Are you next slide? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, everyone.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so the second white paper that we completed was for the Complete Streets and Active Transportation. Fairfax County is committed to promoting equity in transportation through the implementation of Complete Streets, which prioritize comfortable, accessible, and multimodal transportation for all users. A few key considerations include amenity zones, street furniture, and placemaking. The next slide. Finally, the last white paper that we completed was for microtransit, micromobility, and autonomous vehicles. This included emerging transportation technologies that will or may transform how people move by addressing last mile challenges and improving access, efficiency, and connectivity. And that is all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for that. And I do apologize for the slide switching. I got a little confident there at the end. Recognizing that that was a lot of information, we do want to provide this opportunity for questions and discussion. But before I open the floor, I do want to bring everyone's attention to our project webpage, as well as the Plan Forward FFX at publicinput.com. That is the central email address that we've created to track feedback. So if you're not ready to provide feedback tonight, we ask that you reach out to that email address. And I see a hand, so I will turn it over to, I believe that is Tom.
Yes, thank you. I'm with the Northern Virginia Bird Alliance, which is a chapter of Audubon Society. The Green Buildings Policy Plan includes the bird-friendly design component to protect migrating birds. Well, there's two threats to migrating birds. One is the building design, the bird-friendly glass, and I'm fairly sure you're covering that. But the other component is lights on tall buildings after 11 o'clock at night during migration season. And I'm wondering whether there is any consideration being given to that issue. There's over 1 billion birds die from bird collisions every year. There's lights out programs all over the United States, all up the East Coast as well. So can you tell me whether there is, and if there is any place we can provide more information to you on that issue?
Thank you, Tom. I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Carly. I did actually, your email made its way to me today, so thank you very much for providing that recommendation regarding the glass and the lighting. The glass is definitely glass is definitely something that we do get commitments to. I think we can explore the lighting. I will have to double check some of the past commitments we've gotten. I think some of them have included lighting, but we are doing research and coordinating internally to make sure that we are on the right track with that. And we will also be reaching out to you. And Carly, I see you came unmuted as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, as part of the lighting policy we have, it is very much geared towards its lighting's impact on humans. So that's something we want to look at is more its impacts on wildlife, including birds. So that's something we'll look at, and I think probably be talking to your group more about. So thank you.
Right. I don't see any other hands. Can the project team help me out just because I'm on one screen and scrolling through? And then Tom, I still see your hand. If you still have a question, that's totally fine. I just want to make sure that we've addressed your comment at this time. Okay.
Green, I don't
So
see
then
any
we've
other
got
hands.
a.
Oh, there's one there.
There's
This
something in
is
the
Ryan. We've
chat.
got a comment in the chat here from Mary Cortina. When can we see 2 transportation papers, complete streets and the micromobility? She's not been able to see them on the Plan Forward project website.
Those papers are being finalized, and a news blast will be sent out once they're published on the website. Thank you. Thank you for that, Ryan. I see a hand, I think Penny Gross, and then Larry Zaragoza.
Thank you. Many of our older communities were built without amenities like sidewalks and so forth. I know this is a plan forward, but could you address how the policy plan amendment might incorporate our older communities without amenities?
Thank you for that. I'm going to tap our transportation and land use teams for that one.
Oh, can I add something, Corrine?
Oh, yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is Anna on the health topic. I think one of the things that we're looking at with health is some of the data that I mentioned, and I think looking at our pretty rich data on crashes, pedestrian crashes specifically, will be one of the tools, you could say, that we're looking at including in the policy plan when it comes to active living and safety. I didn't mention safety, but that's a really important part of being able to be active in our community is being safe. And so using some of that pedestrian crash data to inform areas to prioritize for investment in things like sidewalks and potentially lighting as well will be one of the places that will look to guide that priority. But certainly when it comes to the design of sidewalks or what size of a sidewalk is appropriate for, the size of a road, for example, that would be something that transportation would have the guidance for.
Right, and this is Bob Pecora with FCDOT. I just want to add to what Anna was mentioning is that with our comprehensive transportation analysis program that we've started out, an ongoing process, we work with plan amendments and rezoning cases. We're working with the development community to identify where there are gaps in sidewalks, crosswalks, and also bike trail facilities. So we have work that is ongoing in that regard, but also in our in the policy plan work that will be incorporating new recommendations and policies to address, or at least to help us to identify where there are gaps in older communities or where there are no sidewalks or facilities for pedestrians. We're also working with our active transportation group on the active Fairfax plan, which is also looking at bike facilities and pedestrian facilities. So thank you for the comment. We'll be definitely focusing in on that and working with our partners within the policy element team, like Anna at Health and with our land use element as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Larry next. And Larry, if you're talking, we can't hear you. If you could just make sure you're unmuted.
I'm sorry, I was talking and I was muted. So not the first time. So I just wanted to say that when I think about green buildings and I think about electric vehicles and other things, the first thing I think about is reducing carbon footprint, although there are other benefits as well. But one of the things that doesn't come across, didn't come across to me as I read the materials that I read, is the reduction in greenhouse gas footprint, which I think is important, and that was missing. And similarly, when I think about having a clean environment, that means getting rid of the pollutants and chemicals that can be harmful to people. So in the materials you had tonight, you talked about PFAS, but when I think about PFAS is just one of a number of the chemicals that we have. It's basically PFOA, that people typically talk about when they speak about the group. And then in the current comprehensive plan, it calls out, I think, asbestos and maybe radon, but there's a lot of others too. So I hope that as you move towards finalizing things, you'll cast things in terms of the broader universe of contaminants and incorporate the importance of things like reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That's my comment / question.
Thank you. I think just to quickly get at the greenhouse gas emissions, I think the intent of the green building paper was to really describe how we would be incorporating the CCAP recommendations, and so I think it without directly saying it, it fed into that. But your point is well taken, and I will pass on, or Carly's here, so we'll pass on the information about the contaminants as well. Carly, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
No, nothing really else to add. Just yeah, we're looking at kind of those issues that have really kind of been getting more and more attention lately, like the PFAS and stuff like that. But certainly we can look at those other items and see how we can incorporate policies that could be implemented through the development process.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other raised hands. If anyone has a question, feel free to come off mute and speak up, or we're also happy to let you digest and get back to us when you're ready with the plan forward, ffx@publicinput.com.
Corinne, there's a.
Yep. I was just going to say there was one more comment in the chat asking.
Oh, I can't see the chat.
I'll read it out loud. So the comment is, how are charging stations being addressed, identifying key areas to prioritize distribution and placement, and ensuring in accordance with One Fairfax, not just cars would need.
So with EV charger, electric vehicle charging, with the policy plan, we're looking at opportunities within new and redevelopment. So if a proposal is coming in for rezoning, we work with the developer to make sure that they're putting in between 2 and 5 up to 10% of charging stations, making sure that that parking facility is wired to be able to easily accommodate the installation of future stations. But regarding your question about the One Fairfax piece, the Office of, and I always mix up the acronym, so excuse me, OEEC, the Office of Environmental and Energy Coordination, they are working on a Charge Up Fairfax program that does provide charging stations to areas that don't have them currently, so older residential areas. And I think the county is also currently working on an electric vehicle readiness strategy through that office as well. So the things that aren't being captured necessarily through the development process and new and redevelopment is other parts of the other county agencies are working to try and bridge those gaps. And we're working closely with those agencies, but I can also pass the question along and incorporate it into our feedback report for the additional information. I hope that answered at least some of your question. Salem, let me know if not.
It looks like it did. She said thanks.
All right, well, we have 5 minutes left. If there are no other questions, we'll let you get back to your evening early, but staff will still be here until 8 o'clock if anyone has anything else. But we thank you so much for your time. We know this was a lot of information, and we hope that you reach out to us through the planforwardffx@publicinput.com email address if you do have any feedback. And all of the feedback will be incorporated into our community feedback report that we're working on starting right after this meeting. So thank you all again, and have a good evening. Unless anyone else has questions. All right. Is there anything else in the chat, Salem?
No more questions. Just a couple of comments about the presentation.
Okay, great.
So
Thank you so much.
Et cetera. So.
All right, I will stop sharing then. And I'll hang out if anyone has any questions, but otherwise, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Corinne. Appreciate it.
Thank you.